You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show, and your views and comments are welcome. 1422, that's the text line, 1422. You can also post your comments on our Facebook wall, and we'll share them with the rest of the world. Newsfile is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, welcome to the new world. And Star Assurance, that is your solid partner. And we're going to have a very interesting discussion about a development that we are told, a trade, an illegal trade that we are told is even more lucrative than the drugs trade. Can you imagine that we have lost so far in excess of 50 million United States dollars to SIM-box fraud? And I say, it looks like we don't exactly need external aid to fix the doomsday situation. I'm privileged to be joined in the studio by Kwame Ba-Echamfor. He is with the NCA and he's the principal manager. Good morning and welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Also, we have Nixon Wampamba. He's head revenue assurance and fraud management at MTN. But he's here because he is on the task force that busted just a while ago the former GREDA boss over SIM-box fraud. Also in the studio is a man who used to sit where exactly I'm sitting and doing what I'm doing now. He's my mentor in many ways. I haven't told you about that. Kweku Sechi Ado. He's the CEO of the Telecoms Chamber. Kweku, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, boss.
Good. And how does it feel to be on the other side on this show?
I'm quaking.
That you're going to take questions from me?
I'm quaking.
I don't believe
Please
that.
Please be gentle with me.
I don't believe that. Wampamba, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great. Now, I'd like to start with you, Mr. Chamfor. When we say SIM-box fraud, what exactly are we talking about?
I will start off with telecom fraud.
Telecom fraud?
Yes. And that's why Nixon is a revenue assurance manager. There are all manner of fraud in the system, and SIM-box is one of them. But to go to that point of SIM-box, what it is that it's being used as an illegal bypass of international traffic. So it is not the SIM-box, which is a crime, but it's the act of bringing in an international call without a license. And how is this done? This is done with a SIM-box. What a SIM-box is that it is an equipment which has slots for more than 4 SIM cards, sometimes 4 SIM cards, and then you connect internet to it. Then international calls are brought in over that internet which is connected to it. Then the international calls are translated to the receiving parties as local calls because it has been equipped with SIM cards of our local service providers.
And typically I get to know that SIM-box fraud is going on when I receive an international call,
yes,
but I find the number that's calling me is a local number.
Yes, yes. And sometimes some of the numbers may not be full range numbers. Sometimes somebody is calling from UK and the number is coming as an American call. It may not be through a SIM-box, but these are all other characteristics of bypass international traffic.
Obviously, a major headache for the telecoms industry. And as CEO of the chamber, how exactly do you bring your subscribers in to ensure that this doesn't continue? How do you get us to understand, first of all, that this is SIM-box fraud?
Okay. First of all, one of the reasons why Nixon Wampamba is here is that he's representing the chamber. Each of the network operators have representatives on the anti-fraud task force.
Okay.
So he's just one of them. But of course, all of them could not be here.
Right.
And so he's representing the industry.
That's
so
right.
He's here as an officer of the chamber.
We are privileged to have him on the show.
Okay. So when you receive a call and it, you know, from overseas, and yet it looks like a call from across the street, because it shows on your phone as a local call. After you're done taking your call, what you can do as a subscriber to help in the management of this problem, just the management, is that you type the number that called you, and you also type SIM boxing, SIMBOXING. SIM, it could well actually be SIN, but it is SIMBOXING, and then you send to 419. So type the number that called you.
You send it to an interesting line,
right.
419.
And then you also type SIM boxing or SIM box and send to 419 across all networks. It is free. You don't pay anything. Number two, the party or the person, your uncle or cousin or partner that called you from overseas is not going to get into any trouble.
That's my next question, really. So
Okay.
you preempted it. I am reporting that my cousin somewhere else called me with a line that I suspect, obviously it's a SIM-box fraud. And I report the person. You don't do anything to the one who called me.
No. Okay, he's not doing anything illegal where he is, he or she is.
He's the one that is calling.
Yes, but there's nothing illegal that he's doing where he or she is. Yeah. So you send it, and you immediately receive a message from your network provider acknowledging your message and thanking you for it, and then they go ahead to block it. And perhaps Nixon or Kwame can, in summary, just say what happens in terms of what happens behind the scenes. But the point is the number will be blocked.
Okay.
And if you are in some competition or some rivalry with somebody, if you send that person's number and he adds SIM boxing, that doesn't count because Nixon will figure it out. Kwame, can figure it out. They have ways of determining that this is a regular subscriber's number, and it is not a SIM box number because there are certain characteristics that are associated with SIM numbers that are used for SIM boxing, and therefore, just to warn you, if you're in a rivalry with somebody over another person or something, and you want to do them in, this won't work. Let me just put that there because I've been asked about that.
Right. Now, Nixon, still on the very basics, how is it that I'm calling from the United States of America and I'm calling your line here in Ghana, and yet I'm not the one who has to take any blame for the SIM box fraud?
Okay, so the originator, so your cousin or your friend who's living, let's say, in the US, they're using a normal operator like AT&T, or they're using
and there are millions of them who are listening to us right now.
That's right.
Yes.
They're using the normal, AT&T, again, just to mention some of the operators, calling cards, you have Verizon, you have different BT, British Telecom. So when they make the call, they're just dialing your number. When they dial your number, their operator takes that call and says, okay, I need to terminate this call in Ghana, but I have so many carriers who will deliver that call for me to Ghana. So when they send that call to the carrier then decides how they're going to terminate that call. Now, normally, they would terminate it legally, which means they'll send it through another maybe international carrier who would terminate it to us. But unfortunately, because of the mathematics of making money, there is other people who offer cheaper price to terminate those calls. And once those people obtain those calls, they will then use illegal means by sending those calls through the internet to terminate that call. Again, it's about pricing. And if you look at even the big carriers themselves, especially in the US, most of them use VoIP to terminate calls.
VoIP being, maybe you want to explain what VoIP is.
Yeah, so it's basically voice over the internet. So basically they get your normal call that you're calling and turn it into an internet protocol, so it can actually be sent over the internet, which means it could arrive even on Viber, for example. But in most of these cases, these calls are sent over the internet, which then comes into Ghana over the internet. And
I've been reading a very instructive article by Maximus Ametogo, who is a technology entrepreneur, and he explains your VoIP that you speak about, that it includes the use of Viber, Skype, WeChat line, Facebook Messenger, and many such, others.
Yes. So basically, this is one of the industries that is really developing. In a sense, it is obviously cheaper to make calls over Viber, so people are adopting to it because you spend far less money. And it's exactly the same thing with SIM boxing, because you have a lot of calling cards. A lot of our relatives who are abroad do not have that much disposable income, so they try to save money. So they use calling cards. When they use calling cards, the calling card companies do not want to send those calls to Ghana paying 19 cents. They'll prefer to pay 10 cents. So they give it to another operator who will basically send that traffic over the internet, which then becomes
So
SIM
the
boxing.
caller is completely unaware.
Is completely unaware.
Absolutely innocent.
And if you look at, for example, the pricing, for example, if you look at AT&T, from AT&T in the US to make a call to Ghana, it costs almost 80 cents. 80 cents. So that person who's using AT&T to make that call pays 80 cents. So by the time that call gets here, you can see that really the amount of money coming down became smaller and smaller, and those guys in the middle are trying to maximize their profit. So they find the cheapest route on how to deliver that call.
Why is it fraud? These are individuals who are seeking to make one's ability to call from make these international calls cheaper by using other, technology. What makes it illegal and fraud?
What makes it illegal is that you don't have a license to bring in this international traffic. And this is how government, with its approval of the 4 licenses, is introducing an international carrier license. What has happened in the telecom space is that we've left this particular market for, let me say, foreign entities who are out there, and then they take these traffic from the calling cards and the external operators, and then they have the choice to choose between a legitimate route or pass it through a SIM box operator to come in. So it's just a whole network that it's a choice for the wholesaler that I take a legitimate route or I go through a low-cost route, which sometimes is illegitimate.
Very interesting points there.
So if somebody, so mobile network operators have what is called the gateway license,
right,
which Kwame was speaking about, which allows them to terminate international calls in Ghana. They pay a fee for that license of $2 million, and then it's renewed for $200,000. It used to be $100,000, it's been doubled to $200,000. So it's through this gateway that calls ought to come to Ghana. For calls to come into Ghana, the tariff is being set at 19 cents. That 19 cents includes 6 cents that goes to government per minute, 19 cents a minute. Embedded in it is 6 cents that goes to the government. The 13 cents...
That's for every call?
For a minute.
For a minute?
Yes,
okay.
A minute. Yeah. Now, these calls that come through SIM boxes are able to terminate in Ghana at a much cheaper price. 6 cents, 7 cents, but much cheaper. Therefore, it is cheaper for people to call Ghana through that means, and therefore it is more attractive. Okay, so the traffic that would normally have otherwise gone through the gateway is now migrating to the grey market through SIM boxing because it's cheaper. And so over the last 4 or 5 years, one network operator, for example, that was receiving something like 4 million calls a day is now receiving 1.4 million minutes.
Okay.
Minutes is whatever. 1.4, and that's not because people are not calling Ghana, they're just not doing so through the legitimate route because it's expensive.
I'm
and
understanding
therefore,
that is explanation because I had read that MTN, for example, in 2014 was losing upwards of $600,000, is it, per month due to SIM-box fraud. So I wanted to get the understanding, how exactly does it lose this money?
Okay. Yeah, so how do we lose the money? At the end of the day, when the call comes through the register...
And this is not MTN specific.
Yeah,
right.
but any operator. Yeah. So when the traffic comes through the legitimate route, we charge 19 cents for those calls to be terminated. Yeah, and we pass some of that money to the regulator, and some of that money also is tax, and some of that money is our revenues. If it doesn't come through the legitimate route, we lose that money. We don't get those 19 cents at all. Yeah? So imagine it goes to another operator who then terminates that call. Yeah? Or it goes to A party to terminate it to B party. So really what we're looking at here is that instead of you receiving the 19 cents, the SIM boxer is collecting, let's say, the 15 or whatever, or 10, whatever he's charging, and then he's making a retail call to terminate that call. So we're losing the bulk of the 19 cents would have collected from the international operator.
What you call the retail call is the local call from
the local call.
SIM box to the final destination that the call was meant for. So it will be the local component. That's what you're calling it.
So yes, it's only the local component that really, I guess, the operator would receive, which are far much smaller, especially if they utilize, let's say, any kind of promotions or any kind of bonus airtime. So basically, the loss is that arbitrage difference.
And if I may ask this question, Kwame, I understand that even in that circumstance that he tells us now, they still have to pay.
For SIM boxing?
Yes.
No. Because we have a certain mechanism that if we identify a SIM for fraud, you are supposed to block it within 2 hours.
Okay.
So if it's something that is hurting you, we expect that you block it out. But to leave it beyond that time, you calculate the hours that SIM card was in operations for you to pay on the minutes. I know Nixon has placed this diagram there. I want to illustrate how, in my explanation to this whole mechanism, how it is done, if you allow me.
So are you going to use exactly what he has there, or you're doing yours separately?
I will not do mine. I will just touch on.
So we are doing SIM boxing 101 here on Newsfile.
That's right.
And our lecturer is Kwame Bar Echamfo of the NCA.
Great.
Take us through.
So Nixon mentioned 0 cents is what AT&T is supposed to bring charges its customers for international calls to Ghana.
0.80 is what you've written.
Yeah, you've written 0.80.
Yeah.
Cent. I mean dollars. So 80 cents.
Okay.
Yes. Right. So here it gives this traffic to the international carrier. You have no control over whether this international carrier comes through a gateway. There's a gateway in here. This is what Kwaku is talking about.
Okay.
The disadvantage is that these gateways, it used to be an AT&T gateway, and they would be doing peering. Countries were talking to each other, peering. So these guys were not there. The gateway operators were international carriers. The market has evolved. Now there are people who run carrier services and they don't have gateways. So they've come in between. You don't have control over this guy. And there's nothing wrong with going over the internet and coming to this gateway. There's nothing wrong with it. What is wrong is that you are going to a SIM box, and this doesn't have the characteristics of international telephony trade, because this SIM box is bringing in an international call as a local call. Every international call, whatever this guy is bringing out to a country, is supposed to show that country's code, that network code, and the subscriber's code. That is the characteristics of international trade. So let's not simplify it as just a price. There's a whole gap of issues that we have not been able to cover up as a country. And that is why government is introducing a number of measures. Because if it is 19 cents as a country, which we so much deserve, because if we illustrate, in Ghana, a certain operator is charging pesos, and it gives the receiving party 4 pesos. If MTN is giving a call to Airtel, if it's charging 8 pesos, it gives 4 pesos to. So it is. You can see it is 50-50.
Okay, we'll interrogate the price bits shortly. So if you're done, just take your seat for me, and then let's proceed from this point. What I need to really understand, and I suppose that my audience will really want to understand, is we are talking about the SIM box. What is that?
The SIM box is basically a machine for, initially these machines were designed for routing calls. So the origination of having this kind of machine was actually in the UK. A lot of companies realized that if you had to make a mobile call, it was very expensive. So what most of those companies did is they created these machines where you could put different SIMs. So if you want to terminate a call on Telefonica, use a Telefonica SIM. If you want to make a call to T-Mobile, use a T-Mobile SIM. And these machines were then basically used for routing calls and also for helping them reduce their internal costs. These machines are now being utilized as GSM sort of gateways to create this market for SIM boxing, because it's a big market and the perpetrators of it are making a lot of money. Yeah?
And on that note, Kwekuwa, I ask you, there are those who are suspicious that the telcos cannot be exonerated in this because those who are engaged in this fraud buy the SIM cards in bulk. Thousands, perhaps millions. How do they get them? They obviously are not buying them one by one.
Well, I don't know why you say they obviously aren't. Because to put together a broom, you do so by picking a broomstick at a time. So, you know, it's 3 here and 4 there and 8 there. And they've got, you know, this is an operation. So it's not just one person buying one SIM at a time. By lots of people buying a few SIMs at a time, over time, in different locations, all right? So that's how they gather it. I understand that in this recent operation, this recent bust, I haven't seen it, but I believe that Kwame might have or has more information than I do with regard to that bust, that they found a box with thousands and thousands of SIM cards. Network operators sell SIM cards. It's their business. They're registered to do so. Just like Crocodile Machetes sells machetes. You know, they have permission to do so. They sell to wholesalers who would sell to distributors and sub-distributors and to vendors and other retailers, okay? It is entirely possible that along this value chain, somebody, you know, might have sold that box of SIM cards to these perpetrators. But you know something? You've got suspects in your hands, they are in handcuffs with the Criminal Investigations Department. Well, just find out from them who they bought it from. And whether
that's a good point.
And whether the distributor or individual who sold it to them did so knowing, because if it's a distributor or a wholesaler, it's their job to sell SIM cards in wholesale, in bulk. But did they knowingly sell it or sell them to this person, knowing full well the purpose to which they were going to put it? That's the purpose of the criminal investigation.
Okay.
But that you know, that person or network operators are no more culpable for the beheading of, they're no more culpable for the SIM crime, the SIM box offense, any more than Adai Cutlass or Crocodile Machetes is for the beheading of another man of a man by another.
What's an example?
Using a machete.
Right.
Yeah.
Or indeed, the cyber crime, right?
Right.
They use computers. Well, is the company that sold the computers responsible for the cyber crime?
Kwame, I'm struggling to understand. We understand, for example, that an individual will be entitled, I don't know if it is now, to register a minimum of 10 SIM cards, right?
What it is, Samson, is that registration, you can forge it. Okay, so where we saw with the registration that was done, that people can identify, for example, the Ghana national passport. You have an alphabet to start, and you have 6 digits to follow. And when you put into their systems as the service providers, agents, you put that in, you can then, it gives you the screen to put in a surname and a first name. And you can put a Kofi as a first name and Nama as a second name. And the system will take it and will register you.
You run the registration for thousands.
That's right. That's why. Yes, that's why.
And those who are engaged in the SIM box fraud are not in the dozens. They are more.
That's right.
We understand in 2014, about 17 of them were suspected. You had about 13 of them that had, been detected.
Yes.
So to speak.
Yes. For every minute, there's somebody analyzing how SIM cards behave and whether they are human or they are SIM box, and then going into which locations these SIM boxes are coming. And you see that on the cell analysis of any particular operator. So you can identify which areas these SIM boxes are going on. Then you go into location detection, or location finding. We can take you sometimes 5 meters away from where the SIM box is. So it's a whole chain of trying to identify where the fault is. But
in respect of the registration, do I hear you say we're helpless?
That is where the difficulty for a service provider, for example, is that as a customer gets to them and say, this is my ID card, the service provider do not hold the database of the passport office. So it will accept that passport and say, it's supposed to be credible. That is why government is bringing in the clearinghouse. So you as a service provider, you have a certain ID, and then the clearinghouse will give clearance to that ID that, yes, I cross-check with the database of the passport office, and they have the same details of that same person you want to activate on your. So now the service provider is absolved from any blame of any person being registered on their network. But for now, it is difficult to hold a service provider down that you did not register a certain subscriber properly. And many of these SIM cards which are used for the fraud are not properly registered, because no one will properly register a SIM card to his name and put it into a SIM box. Because what it is that we can follow you wherever you are as per that credible
ID. Does it
ID.
sound to you that this is a fight that we can win?
It is a fight that we can win, but it's approach. Yeah, I think even if the regulator brings in clearinghouse to validate every single ID, it is going to be a problem, because we've been down that road before. Most of the information is not in a centralized database. Yeah, right now, if you look at the DVLA information, for example, which is one of the official IDs, it is very difficult for you to authenticate that this is the correct ID, because the database actually do not exist. But secondly, you should also ask the other question, yeah? How does the equipment for SIM boxing arrive into the country? That is another question that needs to be asked. How does this equipment come here? Because if the equipment is not here, the SIM box cannot happen.
Okay.
Mr. Sampson,
take this direct question.
Yes.
I mean, this is someone who is very, good at this job. In the one engineer, he says that the NCA SIM card registration system is porous and old school. They can't detect if someone is registering thousands of cards.
Yes, that is true. It was old school. That is why we disbanded it. It's not working now. It was useless. And we are going to what is...
You say the solution is a clearinghouse. This engineer says, no, clearinghouse is not the solution.
I mean, we don't know which clearinghouse he read about, but if he should have read about the paper...
I'm hearing some of my guests who are just about to join us, who are sitting in here, also nod to what I said earlier, that the clearinghouse is not the solution.
Right. You see, the clearinghouse is a generic word for what we want to do. In there is subscriber identity management services. Subscriber identity management. Let me explain that. So if you should take that as a specific, the database, which is for the DVLA, is not credible. The onus is on this identity management service to see that that database that they are verifying from is clean. So it will not be a service provider's job. The clearinghouse will build a credible database of all national IDs, or the 4 as it stands now, to make sure that, yes, we can have this person if it so happened that he registered that SIM in his name. So let us take it this way. They will also take off the ghost names from the other databases. For databases, you can always create a blacklist, a white list, and a gray list. What you are sure of is the white list, and you only verify on your white list. For those that you are in doubt, you put on the gray list, and then you go to that database owner and say, I have these guys. Can we cross-check the ID for us to see that it is true? And this is a specific job for a certain entity. He is not a service provider to interface operators. It is his job to make sure that databases are correct, and he verifies the identification of subscribers before any services is activated to them.
Now, listen, as we get ready to wrap up this discussion, I want you to get ready and to tell us exactly how you went about this bust, because you are directly involved on the task force, and tell us if it gives us any future hope for the future. But Kweku, I've heard, I don't know what you say about the clearinghouse, but I've heard that it's pure waste of money. We shouldn't be doing it. But earlier, sometime in 2012, 2013, I've heard some of the telcos say there is a solution. I've heard Gerhard Mensah of the Vodafone, for example, say that the way to go is pricing. I've heard you repeat that ad nauseum, that it's pricing.
Okay.
How do you explain that?
All right, so I'll respond to that after Nixon.
Okay. So my question is, how did you come about this recent bust? How exactly did it happen? And how do you look at that as hope for the future, so that we can save this amount of money, to...
Actually, I was deferring to Nixon with respect to their response.
This same question.
On the interconnect clearinghouse.
Okay. Speak to that.
So, sorry, what was the question again? Because I was concentrating
on the interconnect clearinghouse. Because
is that the solution, or it's the pricing?
Really, it is the pricing. The international clearinghouse will not stop bypass. The interconnect clearinghouse will not stop bypass. Similar to what I drew here, the interconnect clearinghouse will sit in the middle between us operators and an international gateway. Yeah? And as the SIM boxes are bypassing us, the SIM boxes will also bypass the clearinghouse. Now, I know Kwame has mentioned that the clearinghouse is going to have better, cleaner databases than we have. But currently, I don't know how many subscribers we have in the whole of Ghana, 23 million or something like that? 28 million.
Million subscriptions.
Validating that information is not an exercise that can be done probably even in a year. It is going to be a humongous exercise to ensure that everyone has a valid ID. And really, without a valid ID in the country, it is really very, very difficult for you to then authenticate information which is in a database of knowing which is credible, what is not credible. Because literally, you have to invite every single person to come in to confirm their picture, that is the person who is in that system.
Samson, for scientists doing databases, creditable databases, it's possible. Okay. It's not a humongous task that will take a year. Even building a network from scratch can take 6 months. Okay. Not to do with databases.
Now hold on, let me hear Kweku on the question of pricing.
So there's no SIM boxing in Nigeria, for example.
Because?
In Nigeria, it costs about 3 cents, US cents, to call into Nigeria. Indeed, it costs 200 times less to call Nigeria from the UK than it costs to call Ghana. It's 3 cents to call Nigeria, and then about 4 cents average to call within Nigeria. Therefore, if you set up a SIM-box operation in Nigeria, you will lose 1 cent every minute. Pointless. South Africa is 3 cents to call in South Africa, and average 3 cents to call within South Africa. You set up a SIM-box operation, pointless. Therefore, with Ghana, it's 19 cents a minute. Network operators are obliged to charge 19 cents per minute. That's the regulation, that's the law here. If you charge less than 19 cents, you will be penalized the difference times 2. So if you charge 18 cents, you will pay 2 cents a minute in penalty. So network operators' hands are tied. They can't charge less than 19 cents. The SIM box operators can bring in calls for as low as 6 cents. All right? So the network operators are in competition. That they are in a competition they cannot win because it's cheaper to, you know, there's a cheaper alternative to for subscribers to make calls. And I've compared this to cocoa smuggling, and SIM boxing is airtime smuggling. That's what it is. It's airtime smuggling. And if the Ivory Coast is paying its farmers, say $100 a kilo for their cocoa, and in Ghana we're paying $80 a kilo for the cocoa, the Ghanaian farmers will take their cocoa across the border because there's enough of an incentive to take the risk to go and sell it in the Ivory Coast.
Okay.
And you can set up task forces with weapons. They will not be able to stop them because there's enough of a margin even to influence and corrupt the border guards and so on.
Right.
And if you use pricing, either pay as much as the Ivory Coast is paying its farmers, or you pay more. If you pay more, you actually have reverse smuggling. People are the same everywhere. And where there's an incentive to make money, they will set up an enterprise to do so.
Kwame, why don't you understand this simple solution? Why is it difficult for the NCA to appreciate this?
It is a complex situation to solve it with a simple suggestion of price changes.
It's worked in Nigeria, it's worked in South Africa.
You jump so many countries over them. It is like choosing between a capitalist economy and trying to say you want to use a communist approach. Okay.
And please, you are wrapping up. You are back on the board.
Yes, so I'm back on the board. This is about 25% of what the retail in the US is. So do you think this is what is influencing this?
You're mentioning the figure because we are on radio as well.
Yes, I'm mentioning the figure that 19 cents is about just 25% of the 80 cents AT&T is charging. Do you think this is the big influence on how AT&T is charging? In Ghana, a network operator charges 8 pesos and gives away 4 pesos. That is 50-50. Let's use the approach of international carrier here. And US is saying pay to other countries between 19 cents and 23 cents. That is US government policy. Ghana chose 19 cents, not the upper band. Tanzania is choosing 23. Our neighboring countries are choosing between 21 and 23. So if you really, these SIM boxes here, activated by SIM numbers, registered, if they are registered, there will be no SIM box here. Even if we all get SIM boxes in our bedrooms and we have SIM cards also registered in our name.
They're about $50 million we are told we have lost so far.
Yes.
About how much of it would have come to government, roughly?
Usually we do our calculation by what would have come to government, and then the operators
roughly that amount. About how much would have come to government?
That was all what was for the government, and operators would have earned 1.5 of that.
So that amount really would have come to the government?
Yes.
Okay. That amount and what you are receiving now per the 6 cents that you get from what they pay you.
That is if the call comes through the
if the call
legitimate-
comes through, you feel
legitimate route.
that is the best way to rake in revenue than the solution they are proffering for you?
Samson, it's not about raking in revenue. It's about a country taking what it is due. The U.S. government accepts that for every country or for any service provider, you are worth something to be paid for a caller coming to you. We call it we call it sending party.
Sorry, but let me
You
jump in
cannot
here.
disprove the fact that the pricing is the problem. If you look at Ivory Coast, next door to us,
Yes.
yeah, they charge around 22 US cents.
Yes.
And how much is the cost to call off net or on net? 19 cents, 17 cents. The difference is very small. It's 5 cents in between that.
So,
Yeah?
so which approach are you choosing? Do we go the Nigerian way or we go the Ivory Coast way, where local calls is as expensive as international calls,
No,
or where international calls are as low as national calls? Which way do you want us to go? Ghana has studied all these markets. It's not just African markets. We are looking to be a developed country, and so you
Okay,
go in.
but you agree with us, it's a price problem. You are agreeing it's a price problem.
I'm not saying it's a price problem.
It is a
or
price
it's not a
problem.
price
Do
problem.
you
I'm
agree
saying
or you
it-
don't?
I'm saying
Do you
it-
agree or you don't?
It is one. It is one of the things to consider. What we have is loose control. Loose control of he saying, yes, SIM boxes get into this country. How does it get into the country? People are using SIM cards to do SIM boxing and they are not properly registered. How do we get them properly registered? Let's get them properly registered. Let's put it into a SIM box and let's see that if everyone will be identified in that SIM box, we will have SIM box
And
for
what
all.
will be the...
So,
Sorry,
but also
go on.
let's make sure that SIM boxes do not come into the country. Let's make sure
Yes,
they don't
so
come
we
into
have our national borders control officers. So this is something they are so much aware of, and they are also improving their systems.
From a stone, it
Yes.
sounds to me that they don't very much.
No, because
absolutely
all the
trust-
equipment, even from-
absolutely trust the system and your, outfits. So to speak.
Yes, you don't trust the customs for protecting our borders. You don't trust yourselves for registering customers correctly on your network, because we bring you a white database and say verify with this white database. If it is not in our database, we would take it
Okay.
as a clearinghouse and as an activity.
Yeah,
to
but
make
the
sure-
SIM boxes-
Please take your
Excuse
seat
me,
as-
let me
as-
just
as-
let me
as
just
we- as we
let
wind
me
up.
just land
Yeah.
and say, if there are any doubts about the identity, it is the onus of the clearinghouse to check that database and say, correct, you can activate the person or not.
What will the... I mean, which is the cheaper option?
The cheaper option,
To tweak the price or to set up an interconnect clearinghouse?
yes, we can go back to 1994.
Which is the cheaper?
Which is the cheaper option? Parliament goes into session and say, we've abrogated this law. Cheaper auction. We go back to 1994, there's no 19 cents, and then there will still be SIM boxing. In 1994, there was SIM boxing in this country.
And who were the operators in 1994?
There was Ghana Telecom then. Scancom was coming in. There was
Scancom in
there was
94?
there was the liberalization has started. And SIM boxing
Okay.
is not done
Yeah.
just
Okay.
by
But let's-
service providers.
Right.
I mean, it is about internet. Internet also, when we mention service providers, internet also has service providers.
Okay.
So internet service
I
providers.
think from the operator point of view, I
Listen,
commend you that
Nick-
I think verification of the IDs or whatever that the international clearinghouse, the interconnect clearinghouse would do, I think is very good. My issue is an interconnect clearinghouse is a setup where traffic is actually going to go into that clearinghouse and then handed over. That's got nothing to do with SIMBOX.
Okay.
Right.
So,
Nixon, what you have to understand is that we say this is a generic word, and let's do specifics.
My question to you is, he's talking about something. Are we also neglecting or refusing to see the role that what has been done that has led to this particular
Yes,
bust?
I mean-
with the involvement of, is it SUBAH?
Yes.
How exactly were they involved in this process?
So some of the equipment that was used in this bust, I think the most important equipment that was used was for vendor called Lateral, who was part of one of the operators. And that equipment is actually with that operator. They have probes on the network. And they also have the equipment that was used to do the drive round to actually detect where the actual fraudsters were located. So as far as the effort that the operators put in providing all the CDR information, all the data,
the CDR is the call,
the information. I mean, when you look at it, the operators' part was critical. If the operators did not cooperate for this to happen, it would not have happened.
It sounds as if SUBAH, that's been engaged by the state to do this job, its role was negligible.
Its role, of course, it was, the regulator brought them in.
Insignificant.
It was small. I would say small.
So needless, really, because
needless, because even the operators have been
using. So we're
using
paying them for nothing, really.
This operator who actually does the detection of the SIM boxes was actually also being used by the operators to do the same kind of busts.
Yes, I think it's important for people to understand. Network operators, have officers, they have equipment, and every day it's the bread and butter to block SIM boxes. I mean, with some operators, every month they're blocking like 10,000 SIM box calls. They do this every day without commemoration or celebration or press conferences. It's routine every day. And this task force that did this commendable job, and we commend the task force for the job that they have done. Network operators were and have been members of this task force. NCA is a member, the police, CID department is a member,
right.
BNI, and this is not the first time that there's been a bust. But I think, let me add this.
Yes, I've referred to the one in
Yes.
Domi Pillar 2 in September 2014.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For example, SUBAH was not involved in that. And the equipment that was used for this bust is the same equipment that was used in September. All right? It was actually...
Okay. I'm supposed to end this discussion right here. But,
yes.
But what do you say about that? It appears that we're paying SUBAH for doing nothing really.
Samson, it's not fair that as a team, everybody or some parts of that team wants to take credit for a certain activity that has been done.
Nixon is referred to specific equipment that were used.
Which
equipment were used when SUBAH was not in the picture?
To use his words, it's needless. We are using concerted efforts to find all crimes in the telecom space.
Okay, now
it is not.
Now, what it shows to me, and that's why I'm asking
I think Kwame and
sorry.
Nixon and I are on the same page on this one.
Yes. What we are saying that from us, I don't want, because we belong to the same team.
No, but as a state, we should not be throwing money away.
We are not throwing money away, and it is not fair. It is not fair that as they are doing, service providers are doing certain things in their own space. Government has also procured an entity over this last 5 years, okay, to also support. Nixon receives information from us as to these numbers needs to be blocked and all that. That entity is doing that job.
They advocate a solution that is easier to use, which they say, by the examples of Nigeria and South Africa, will end SIM boxing in this country. You say you don't want that. You want to continue to pay and set up a clearinghouse, which some of the experts say also is a waste of money.
Samson, we can go the Nigerian way and say, we leave this market doing nothing. It's not even about 19 cents. And we say international calls can come in at 4 pesos, because that is what service providers in Ghana want to receive. We can go that easy option and just be in Nigeria. But that decision is not for us on this panel.
You say it's for Parliament.
It is for Parliament to take.
But you must support it first for Parliament.
No, they should have their proposition, because from where they are, they know what they see, and from where we are, and with our international approach to things, we also know the facts that we have, and we believe strongly that we are on the right path. Right. And this SIM boxing issue, with the clearinghouse coming into being from May through to December, the story will change.
Have you raked in more than $50 million over the period?
In our first 3 years, we did $200 million for government. $200 million for the first 3 years.
Okay, so there's big money there. So $50 million is not so much. It can, you know, as it were,
I mean, the clearinghouse is not just for SIM boxes. It does many other things that government is supposed to be doing.
But you register the SIM boxes, don't you?
Register SIM boxes? We don't type approved SIM boxes in Ghana.
You don't approve them?
It is illegal to even hold a SIM box in Ghana. It is not type approved. Every user equipment that comes into this country has to be type approved, and SIM boxes are not type approved in Ghana.
But thankfully, it's not network. Yes, but thankfully, it's not network operators who have responsibility for the distribution of SIM boxes. But
has responsibility for the distribution of SIM cards, which are supposed to be registered with credible IDs. You are supposed to know their customers.
So it's a matter of pricing. And for example, in Benin, where there are a number of countries that have adopted a similar regime as Ghana. Benin, Gabon, Tanzania, Uganda are some examples.
Uganda is not.
In Benin, call volumes fell by 1.6 during the year following the introduction of this this surcharge, which guarantees government this tax component, which in Ghana is 6 cents. In Ghana, call volumes fell by 27% in the 5 months after this surcharge was introduced. In Uganda, they began falling after being stable for the previous 4 years. In Gabon, call volumes fell by 57% in the month after this approach was adopted.
Revenue increased.
In Tanzania, it fell by 16%. What we're proposing to government, and we're in talks with the Ministry of Communications and the Tax Policy Unit of the Ministry of Finance, is understandably government needs money. And that's 6 cents. If the calls were coming through the legitimate route, would accumulate, and government will have those resources to do the things that we need.
But I have to
what we're proposing is a progressive approach. Essentially, free the environment, but government is guaranteed a percentage of the revenues that network operators make. This is the long and short of the proposal.
Obviously, government's fear is that it will not be able to make as much as it is making presently, and that there are ways to plug the loopholes and still maintain the system as it is now. Just your very last one in 20 seconds. How much is it going to cost to establish the clearinghouse?
The pricing that the applicant submitted varies. So depending on who wins.
What's the average?
It's around $20 million.
$20 million.
Yes, but we can in the negotiation stage. At the negotiation stage, we can flesh it out properly, and then we would. It's going to be a cost plus model, so it's not like they can just price anything out of the blue, and that's what we will use. So we will go for value for money, and we will bring a very sanitized system with the introduction of the new licenses.
The task force that you are part of, do you think you're doing a good job? Because it doesn't appear that you are busting as many as you should. You had 17 suspected in 2014. In 2015, we wake up, you are just busting 1.
Yeah, we haven't just busted 1.
Yeah.
We've busted a lot of different places. It's not a.
This was the big one, is that it?
Yes, this was a very big one because there was a concerted effort by the regulators to ensure that we did a lot of. Find a lot of locations and a lot of busts. But again, we're fighting this battle.
But there's been so far only 1 successful prosecution.
Only 1 successful prosecution.
I think that's eloquent testimony of the success of the law and order approach.
Are you referring to the Domipila?
No. I think that one was like 4 years ago. There's just one person, a Ghanaian Italian, who's in prison for this offense. But I presume that the others are on trial. But the point is that
the wheels of
law and order,
slowly.
The law and order approach will not work any more than price controls of the economy worked in the 70s.
Thank you.
Samson, what we have to do is that we have to tighten the controls in this space.
Thank you very much.
It's not just about pricing.
It's been very educative, and I've enjoyed your company. Kwame Baichamfo is with the NCA. He's the principal manager. Nixon Wampamba is head of revenue assurance and fraud management at MTN, and he is on the task force that recently busted the former GREDA boss over this SIM box fraud. And you understand how Kweku Sechiado explained the reason he's on the discussion today also. And Kweku Sechiado is the CEO of the Telecoms Chamber. He is my mentor. Have a good morning. Thank you very much for coming.
I'll hire you as my lawyer.
That's good, that's good, that's good. All right. Okay, so we're taking a break here. When we return, you'll be surprised to know who I have for the next discussion. You'll enjoy it. We'll be right back.